Evening.
All right. Hey, Terry, how's the knee? You're on mute. Hey, Terry, you're on mute.
My knee is fine.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Jason.
Hello.
Hello. Empty chair. Effie Mayor.
Good evening, everybody. I've got 6 o'clock. Let's get started with the board meeting of April 8th. We've already had attendance and we had a closed session. I don't think there's any reportable action, but I'll check in with council at this time on that.
Correct, Mr. President. There is no reportable action. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, General Counsel. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice for all.
All right, thank you. Our next item is item 5, approval of the agenda. May I entertain a motion for that?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Got a motion by Terry and a second by John. Christie, roll call vote, please.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Hi.
President Hahn.
Aye, that motion carries 5-0. Item 6, public comments on non-agenda items. Christie, if you would, please.
Members of the public may address the board on matters not listed on this agenda. The board cannot take action on any item that is not on the agenda. The board or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed, or may ask questions for clarification. These items may also be referred to staff or scheduled on a future agenda. There will be a separate opportunity for public comment for each item on the agenda. Okay, I have 2 emails that came in today or over the past week, so I will read those. The first one is from Steve Black. I'm not sure of the actual numbers, but it seems that BVS resident headcount saw noticeable growth over the past 1 to 2 years, as well as many new homes being built and new water meters being issued. Questions. Can we get an update in an upcoming board meeting or website post summary on our total daily average fresh potable water consumption versus our tested proven daily delivery capacity? 2, what are the total number of water supply wells potable broken down by class, i.e. idle, inactive, active, producing, remedial well work, opportunity, candidates, wells to be abandoned, etc.? 3, can CSD provide guidance on any past and future planned reservoir productivity testing and or modeling that either has or will define our ultimate reservoir delivery capacity versus projected future need? In summary, number 1, does BVS currently have sufficient potable water capacity to serve the community in its current state plus projected growth for the next 5+ years? Number 2, in our long-range plan, how at risk is the community during prolonged drought periods of being forced to haul in water or other contingency means? For example, has our choke point been identified? If so, how close are we? 3, do we have reservoir depletion modeling data that generated a reserve replacement work plan that is currently in place? If not, will that be part of the upcoming long-range planned action items? Number 4, what is our long-term outlook and future plans to strategically manage our potable water supply versus demand? Is there a contingency case for beginning to restrict the issuance of new water meters before asking current residents to curtail? We will need to drill new wells at some point and or purchase volume from other sources. Thanks, Steve Black. The second email I got is from Kara Cooper. What is the plan for fire mitigation this year, since we are now in a severe drought? Fire season is here. Kern Fire is already recommending abatement now. We need the proper equipment for weed abatement. We still have last year's dead dry weeds on easements. We need to get those removed now and the new weeds before plants' moisture level gets too low. Simi Valley has already had a small brush fire. To get the equipment we need now, maybe you could use the money from front gate and pay it back with the next budget, just an idea. Please, we need to be proactive, not reactive. Thank you for your time, Kara Cooper. Okay, those are the emails I received, and it looks like we do not have any hands up.
Great, thank you both for those comments and questions. Moving on to item 7, consent calendar. Back to Christy.
Consent items are considered routine and are intended to be acted upon in one motion without discussion. During this portion of the meeting, the consent calendar will be read aloud. Prior to approval, the president will give the board, staff, and public the opportunity to pull any item for discussion. The remaining calendar will be acted upon. Any pulled items will then be heard and acted upon individually. A, approve minutes of the March 11, 2021 regular board meeting. B, approve minutes of the March 10, 2021 special board meeting. C, approve minutes of the March 16, 2021 special board meeting. D, accept the register of warrants for March 2021.
Thank you, Christy. Any member of the board like to pull any item A, B, C, or D?
No.
Great. Members, I don't see any hands in the public either. I'll entertain a motion to approve the items of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vice President Roberts, second by Director Quinn. Christy, roll call.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Item number 8, information and discussion item, public input on fiscal year 2021-22. Budget development, Mr. Millen and Mr. Jones.
President, members of the board, we have a brief little PowerPoint. Wanted to hit the highlights of the budget process, but more importantly, provide an early opportunity for citizens to share any ideas, thoughts, priorities they may have for the board and us as we're preparing the budget. So this is a new approach, I think, in our budgeting preparation process. So hopefully we can continue to improve on it. But the intent is to try to be a little more inclusive, try and get more ideas, try to let people input into this at an earlier point than when we're ready to adopt it. So Hamid's got the controls. If you don't mind, Hamid, let her go.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. We'll give you the overview and our goals. We'll talk about the input and discussions. Part of what drives us are some basic approaches and I guess principles on preparing budgets. And on revenues, obviously we try to be conservative. We balance. We a couple of years now have eliminated the utilization of what had been a carryover balance. That was effectively the fund balance, and as it had been utilized in the budget, it appeared that we had financing when in reality, had we proceeded with some of those larger projects and purchases, it would have depleted the fund balances certainly below their reserve levels. Our expense approach, part of what we do is we split out what is our normal operating costs so that we can assure ourselves that what we have coming in will fund what we have to do. We take a look at what are our one-time expenses and our capital expenses after we've dealt with the operating budget. And next slide, please. And we make sure that we keep, or we are attempting, I'll say, to reach our policy level the board has had for a number of years. And we've begun to annually revisit those and effectively approve them as just a part of the budget. They haven't really changed much. So, but we try to achieve them. So there's two ways that we might fund our capital. It's either that we have some excess revenue to expenses, which is relatively rare, certainly in the enterprise funds, or that we have some excess fund balance. And capital and projects are an annual consideration. Our equipment does not last forever. Our infrastructure obviously does not last forever. So things need to be replaced, and doing it hopefully in this approach, make sure that we're taking care of the basics while also trying to provide for those one-time and capital items. Again, capital, this is what I basically just said. We either do it from excess revenues or from the fund balance. So we try to prioritize. So some things may not get done this year, depending on what else on the list and how critical it might be. Next page. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was to revamp the cost allocation. So hopefully people understand the concept that what we do for the most part are enterprise fund type operations. We have three distinct enterprise funds: our water system, our sewer system, our solid waste system. We have a fourth, the roads fund, which is separate from the general fund, has its own revenue source, but it's not a fee for service like the other enterprise funds. It's funded from a special assessment. So what we do in administration, in finance, our personnel, all of those utility billings, et cetera, we exist in support of our prime service level, our prime services. So the enterprises, our roads, police obviously is a general fund item funded with our tax dollars. So we develop a system by which, let's say the water system doesn't have its own general manager, doesn't have its own finance director, doesn't have its own HR person to handle those. We've centralized all of those in administration, but the costs are shared because certainly we do billing, we do financing, we have the overall management, we have employees within that enterprise fund for which we oversee it and hire and do all of the HR functions. So we take our costs of administration and we share them. So a couple of years ago, we began to revisit and be a little more, I want to say, open about what the calculations were. And we had some public comment a couple of years back of people not quite understanding how some of our charges came to be. So literally we opened it up, walked through the process so that our budget itself is more transparent than it was before, and people can actually see how some of these costs were derived. So we do that both for administration and general services. General services has building and or facility maintenance costs, and those get shared around as well. Next page, please. A couple other things. We begin putting in some beginning fund, ending fund balances. Tried to be a little more transparent and forthcoming about what those numbers are and how we're doing. The separate interfund transfers, we were being more descriptive of what we were doing and why. between different funds. Next one page, please. This one, adhering to our budget, these policies have been there for years and we take them seriously. So balancing our expenses with revenues, as an example, we strive. I can't say that we're going to be hitting it on all fronts, but certainly we're trying to use appropriate criteria. And so our methodology for cost allocations is there for people to take a look at. And we'd be glad to explain it to anybody if they have questions, try to avoid deficit spending. And we have begun now over the last couple of years to annually revisit, review, and adjust fees and charges. So there are some things that all residents receive as a part of the community. There are other things that are services specific to an individual who has a request for. So if someone, requests a water turn on or a water turn off, that person pays the cost for that service. Not everyone else pays for it because not everyone else is being benefited because that one meter was turned on and off. So we've been revisiting those annually when we do our budget. We'll take a look at them and try as much as we can to recoup the actual cost, because otherwise it ends up that all those citizens are subsidizing that particular resident who's getting a unique one-time service from us. Just real quickly, these are our fund balance contingency levels. So when we do our calculations of what the budget looks like, then we'll be able to set this amount. And part of the process is to achieve this while balancing our budget. Fiscal status of the funds. This is a kind of an explanation of our process. Again, operational capital are separated. We take a look at the budget, and we do go through kind of the exercise of reviewing the historical expenses and not just doing mental increases. So we're not into 2% CPI, therefore all line items go up by 2%. We don't do that. We take a look at what has been our history and what, if any, anomalies are in there in our expenditures that might allow us to actually budget less. Because if we can budget less on a particular item, that means other priorities might get taken care of. And we have some structural deficiencies, and that's what we've been working over the last several years to overcome. We've had the water rate adjustment and the sewer rate adjustment. Those funds, I'm confident, will overcome their structural deficiencies. The next ones on the horizon will be the solid waste fund and the rate for that, and then the roads and the special assessment that is passed and funded, the $340 per housing unit for that. And after that, long term, we'll need to be paying attention to general fund. It is healthy now. However, prior analysis of it and an assessment had indicated that it would eventually be in a challenged position. And so we need to be doing some longer range projections, and Hamid's doing these things where we're going to look out 20 years to better understand when some of those challenges might occur, given some basic assumptions in our modeling. I think I've said before, we're going to be looking at a 20-year capital improvement plan with this year's budget so that we, the board, staff, and our residents can better understand some of what it takes to run the district operations. And when I say that, it's more about the equipment that it takes, what they cost, how long they last, what it takes to replace them, we can get that plan developed, then we can address it. Otherwise, we're just reacting all the time. And I think that's a poor way of planning for the future. So we're going to do the 20-year CIP, and then we're also going to be doing 20-year projections. It's a place to start. So the intent there is to, in advance of it happening, we identify the potential challenge so that we at a board level, staff level, we can make some adjustments in advance and not be surprised or not be taken aback somewhere in the future. So with that, I'm open for questions. The intent here is to open it up to our citizens who may have some comments or questions for you. Oh, and then the next steps. Thank you, Hamid. The calendar we've set up has us looking with department supervisors and department heads over the next week to review the budgets that they've prepared and we've prepared, to talk with the finance committee preliminarily, show them what we're looking at, and then have a budget study session with the board in mid-May, the preliminary budget in early June. And as we have done the last couple of years now, we adopt the budget before the end of the fiscal year. And so we've kind of gotten into this rhythm. It seems to be working. And so we again have a special board meeting in the end of June, at which time we would look for an adoption of the budget. Now, am I done now, Hamid?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Bill. That was great. I don't see any hands in the public, but I'll give a few seconds here just in case.
Any questions from the board?
I was going to go to them next.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, board. Director Grace. Director Quinn. I don't see anybody right now because the screen, I can't see your faces. Director Quinn, anything?
Thank you. No.
Great. Okay, good. Now I can see people's faces. Director Jensen, did I already call you?
I have no questions.
Great. Thank you. Vice President Roberts?
I have no questions.
And none from me. Well done. That completes item 8 on the agenda. Thank you for that presentation, Bill. It's a good refresher. This will be my 4th budget process, I believe. Disclosures by the board of directors. Christy.
Board members are asked to disclose any outside communications with individuals and organizations that have an action item on this agenda that pertains directly to them or their specific personal or private interests, and which communication is not included or disclosed in the agenda package, so that all interested persons have an equal opportunity to express and represent their interests.
Anything to disclose from board members?
None.
Hearing none. Hearing none. Item 10, action items. Number A, authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Bakersfield Well and Pump Company in the amount of $47,260 to complete rehabilitation of well number 31. Mr. Malinan.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is the second of the 2 potable wells that we are moving forward to rehabilitate. And this is phase 2. So you may recall well 32 has gone through the initial work where they do the rehabilitation, et cetera, and they are now finishing up on that one. And the significance of that is our system will have a much greater capacity to answer Mr. Black's question, or to some extent answer that. You know, this well has not been producing, and I'm talking about number 32 at this point. And so we're anticipating it will now produce some 300 gallons per minute. And so as we move forward, if that's the sustainable volumes, that's excellent. 31, following right behind it, is estimated to generate 300 gallons per minute upon its rehabilitation. So we've gone essentially from 0 to 600 gallons per minute on a couple of well rehabs. So this is really important, and we're not done. But this is the phase 2 for 31. And importantly, as we went into the budgeting for these capital items, we had them at $162,000 each. They're coming in at $86,000 roughly a piece. So that's about half price, and that's outstanding. This cost includes sales tax. This is the total price. And so recommend approval, and we look forward to working with Bakersfield well to get this one done and online. Talking with Mr. Parks, I think we're a couple of months out from these wells starting to produce, and so the timing is really good because I think we're going to need them.
Thank you, Mr. Mallon. And questions from the public?
There are none.
Thank you, Christy. And questions from the board, Director Grace,
Nothing for me, sir.
Director Jensen,
None, sir.
Director Quinn,
Nothing. Thank you.
Vice President Roberts.
I have none.
And no questions from me. I'll entertain a motion for item A there.
Mr. President, I move the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager to execute a contract with Bakersfield Well and Pump Company in the amount of $47,260 to complete rehabilitation of well number 31.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice President Roberts and a second by Director Grace, I think it was.
Yes, sir.
Christie, roll call vote.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
Also, aye. That motion carries 5-0. Item B, approve infrastructure committee task assignment, fleet evaluation process / vehicle replacement process. Ms. McEwen.
Mr. President, members of the board, as Mr. Mallon was just speaking of, as part of our budget preparations for the upcoming year, he has requested a 20-year capital improvement and replacement plan from each division or department in the district. While preparing these plans, we realized that the district has not established a consistent process for evaluating the condition, cost of operation, life expectancy, and orderly replacement of our vehicles and equipment. This would be very helpful to have, especially as we prepare these plans. After discussing it with the supervisors and department heads at our last management team meeting, it was suggested that bringing this to the infrastructure committee to research and recommend evaluation criteria, a ranking system, recommended replacement schedules, and funding strategies would be well suited to the purpose and the abilities of this committee. Because district code requires board approval before a committee spends significant amounts of time on any matter, we are bringing this to you for approval tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Christy. Any comments from the public?
There are none.
Go to the board, Director Grace, and also Vice Chair of the Infrastructure Committee.
I have nothing on this item, sir.
Great. Director Jensen,
None, sir.
Director Quinn,
Nothing.
Vice President Roberts,
No comment.
and also the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee. And I also have no comments. I'll entertain a motion for item B.
I move the Board of Directors assign the Infrastructure Committee to research and recommend vehicle and equipment replacement processes for consideration and incorporation into a policy.
Second.
I have a motion by Director Quinn and a second by Director Jensen. Christie, roll call vote, please.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Han.
Aye as well. Motion carries 5-0. Item C, accept the investment report as of February 28th, 2021. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, President Han. The item before you is the monthly investment report for February. The report shows the balances of the district's investment accounts as well as its operating accounts. And in the investment accounts, we had a total of 6.9 million. And in the operating accounts, a total of 118,000. And that was a total of just over 7 million. That was a decrease of 225,000 for the month. And that's just a result of normal operations. I would point out as well, you'll see under the second investment account, the California Asset Management Program. I pretty much liquidated that account just over a year ago. That was our highest earning account, but that has dropped significantly with the status of current interest rates. And so we've got that liquidated. The $9 remaining is just the interest that posted that month. So it'll still be an option in the future, provided that interest rates start going up, it may become a better vehicle. So the next page further details the different balances for the various investment funds and breaks it down pro rata by the district's funds. And with that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Hamid. Any questions from the public?
There are none.
And Director Grace.
No questions. Just thank you, Hamid, for the update.
Thank you, Director Jensen.
I have no questions.
Director Quinn.
No questions.
Vice President Roberts.
Good job, Hamid.
I echo those sentiments. I'll entertain a motion to accept the monthly investment report.
I move the Board of Directors accept the monthly investment report as of February 28, 2021.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Vice President Roberts and a second by Director Grace. Christie, roll call.
Director Grace,
Aye.
Director Jensen,
Aye.
Director Quinn,
Aye.
Vice President Roberts,
Aye.
President Hahn.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Item 11, information and discussion items. A, board comments. Director Grace, the floor is yours.
Not much to add this evening, Mr. President. Just thank you to staff for the update on the budget. We look forward to seeing that at the Finance Committee later this month.
Thank you, Director Grace. Director Jensen, the floor is yours.
I have no comments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director Jensen. Director Quinn.
No comments. Thank you.
Vice President Roberts.
Just one quick thing under department head reports. I would like to hear about the Lakeville wells and where we are on getting another one repaired. It's no cost out of our general fund. It comes out of the recreation fund. But I want to know if we have it scheduled to get repaired before the dry season hits so we can be filling that lake and not have the situation that we had last year.
Thank you, Vice President Roberts. I would just like to thank Mr. Black for his public comments earlier in the meeting, and I assure both people that commented that wildfire mitigation and water are top priority of mine. I shouldn't speak for the board, but I'm sure all 5 of us echo those same things.
Agreed.
Right, I thought so too. Staff reports, item B, Department Head, Finance, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, President Hahn. The item before you is the finance activity reports for period 8. That is the month of February 2021. I do not have anything significant to point out, but I'm available for any questions you may have.
Questions from the public?
There are none.
Questions from Director Grace?
No questions, sir.
Director Jensen?
No questions.
Director Quinn?
Nothing.
Vice President Roberts?
None.
And you're off the hook easy tonight, Mr. Jones. Thank you so much, and thanks for the hard work.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
Christie, could you zoom to the top of the year-to-date column? Okay. And this was just maybe for more of our audience than anything. This indicates 76% at the top of this. So as you are looking through these reports, because I'm sure you're all doing that, you can comparisons of where we ought to be. So if I was looking at this, this is the general fund revenue. We should be at 67%. We're at 64%. So we're slightly below. If you could go down a little bit, we would see, but our expenses are 53%, not 67. So we're ahead of the game there. A way to more quickly and easily use these documents to kind of gauge how we're doing. So thank you, Mr. President.
No, thanks for that pro tip. Appreciate that a lot. Public Works.
Mr. President, members of the board, you have seen our report. We have our division supervisors at the ready. If there are any specific questions about our activities, and with respect to Mr. Roberts' question about Lakeville, barring any other questions, I'll ask Will please to give us an update on what we're doing.
Will Parks, the floor is yours.
In regards to the lake wells, I've sent the info to Bakersfield Well and Pump, and we have not got a quote back from them. We're looking at well 9, well 10, and well 11 next on the list to get rehabbed. And when information pours in, I will let you guys know what's going on there.
Oh, well, just a question. Are they backlogged with work, and is that why we're not getting a proposal in a timely fashion?
Yeah, and it's like well 32. All their rigs are out right now. They have started above ground work on that, updating the wellhead and getting ready to fabricate the lines to hook it back to our system and whatnot. But yeah, it's not that they're backlogged for the quotes. I just need to get on them and see where they're at. It might be ready. I just may need to remind them, and they can get that to me.
Okay. Well, my concern is that the spring is fast approaching, and then summer, and we need to have another well online for lake fill, so the lakes don't get down 3 feet low like they did last year, and what have you. We need that fresh water flowing in, and besides, we make money on the water flow, so it's important that we get that done.
Yeah, and the lakes are already kind of low in my opinion.
Yep.
So the sooner we can get water pumping in there, the better.
Right.
But all the wells at this point, with the exception of one, they are optional. We did shut those off, I think, like a week and a half ago at the association's request. I have been in contact with Brandon, and they're going to be wanting those turned on again. Sounds like very soon here.
Good. Thank you.
I have a question for Will, if I may.
Sure.
Most of us haven't memorized the well numbers. Can you give us a general idea of where those wells are located? It seems like 9 might be at the intersection of Lakeview and Cumberland, but I'm not sure. Can you flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, no problem. As far as the lake wells are concerned,
Yeah.
well 8 is by the fire department. Well 7 is right by Cub Lake, by the Veterans Memorial there. Well 9 is on Butterfield. Well 10 is off of South Lower Valley Road over there by Sunland. And well 11 is off of Greenwater and closer to Garces over on that end on the west side of the valley.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Opportunity for questions or comments from the public.
None?
No hands, right? And I haven't heard yet from Director Grace. Did you have anything?
No questions. Just thank you, Will, for the report and the added information. That's great.
Director Jensen?
No questions, sir.
And I have nothing to add. Directors Quinn and Roberts already have gone. Did you have anything else, anybody?
No, thank you much, Will.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Will. Appreciate it. That was Public Works. Let's do Public Safety Report. Chief Melanson.
Hello, Mr. President, members of the board. This is your Public Safety Staff Report for March 2021. You have the report. I'd like to point out one error on the report. On page 2 at the top, it lists misdemeanor arrests 4, and that is actually 3. That is a typo. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Got it. Thanks for that correction from the public.
Nothing.
Thank you, Christy. Director Grace,
None, sir.
Director Jensen.
Just a couple questions.
Sure.
On March 24th, the CSD's Facebook page reported an incident of a missing at-risk teenager that was, I think, missing late at night and ultimately found. Could you speak to that incident?
Sure. About 11:30 at night, a juvenile female, 16 years old, her mother called the communication center to report that she had gone missing. She had a medical issue that heightened the risk. She was high risk missing. She had never left before. That was important. The call came in to the officer, which happened to be me. I was working that night, and so called in all the resources I could and ended up finding her within an hour.
Who did you find her?
I didn't personally know. Some of the units that we had to called for to come help found her.
Gotcha. And a code red wasn't issued for her?
By the time we found her, a code red had not yet been issued, but it was in the queue, along with a lot of other things that were in the queue. When you have, I've handled dozens, maybe hundreds of these, and there's a certain thing there's certain things that you want to do that's going to pay off the most benefit as quickly as possible. It was really cold that night. It was 33 degrees. Again, this is a 16-year-old female with some pretty serious medical issue. So within 15 minutes, there was a helicopter with a spotlight and infrared over the top of skyline, 300 feet over the area. And those things in the queue could include, does she have a cell phone? Can we ping a cell phone? Does she have an Apple Watch? Can we ping an Apple Watch? Getting search and rescue lined up in case this turned into a prolonged thing. Again, it was really cold and she had already been out there 4 hours. So answer to your question, I don't think that a code red went out by the time she was found. It was in the queue. It would have happened probably within 15 minutes after we located her.
And then one more question. There were 3 misdemeanor arrests. What were the charges on those?
2 for unlicensed driver and 1 for driving on a suspended license.
Were any of them booked or taken to jail?
None of the 3 were booked. They were released on misdemeanor citations.
Okay. Were their cars towed away so they couldn't keep driving?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I don't think they were. No, I'm take that back. I think one of them was towed possibly, but I'm not 100% sure right now.
Okay. Thank you.
My direction to the officers is, generally speaking, we need to be taking the cars. I mean, unless there's a very good reason why you're driving on a suspended license, which there are tends to be very few, then the car needs to be taken to car jail.
Agreed. Thank you. I don't have anything else.
All right. Thank you, Charles, for those questions. Director Quinn?
Nothing. Thank you.
Vice President Roberts?
Just thank you for all that you do, Chief.
I echo those sentiments as well. General Counsel report. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. General Manager and I have had some interesting interactions with the Tehachapi County Cummings Water District. Bill, I don't know if you want to kick off that discussion here or do it under your general report. What is your preference?
I was going to get there, so now that you broached it, let's go.
Okay. Would you like me to kick it off or do you want to?
Let me start. The backdrop for you board members is that we were, from a GM perspective, I was invited to meet and participate in some discussions with our neighbors, our neighboring utility providers, Stallion Springs, Golden Hills, and Tehachapi. And it was related to an upcoming ordinance or an ordinance that had been proposed at the the water district, and it had to do with priorities and who gets water in a drought type situation. So they did provide a meeting for what's called M&I, municipal and industrial users, which we are one. And so we did attend, and I appreciate Don attending because he has a much greater depth and breadth of the water issues and law than I do. And so I thought it was a good meeting. It was informative. However, part of the message is we appear to be heading into a drought. The water district, it appears, will have about a 5% allocation from the state water project. They will be, if this moves forward, I think looking for or recommending that we put conservation efforts into play. So to that end, we have a current conservation ordinance that calls out for different steps. We're taking another look at it. You may recall we're doing our urban water management plan with all those same players. And in the course of doing that, Don Smith had discovered that there's additional steps required now. So we would have to update that. So we're taking a look at that. And we're also taking a look at the overall ordinance, because penalties, as an example, in light of our latest rates and things. So Don Davis is looking at that. So part of what the message also said was, we're not going to be running out of water this year, probably next year. The reserves in the basin are healthy. So that's good news. However, the concern of the M&I users conveyed to the water district was one of, being more engaged with us, and the priorities that they had put more emphasis, it appeared to us, onto the agricultural uses than the M&I uses. And we want to continue that conversation with them to better understand and or impress on them our interest in having, and they seem to concur that, the humans need the water more than the plants at the end of the day. And I'm just paraphrasing all of that. So I'll stop there, Don, and fill in what I missed, please.
No, that really covers a lot of the good ground, Bill. Thank you. I would simply add, based on the 5% state water project allocation, and if these priorities, and what happens is when there is a shortage year, the county water district will establish an annual ordinance. So this is not permanent. And some of the back and forth with them was about the way they listed the priorities, because while they put direct deliveries to M&I, to residents at the top, there are only direct deliveries. And they had ag, and then further down the list, it was alphabetical. So it's A to L or something like that. Down at F is what we do, which is conjunctive use. So essentially they're pretty much telling us that there will not be, what we do is we buy the state water project water, but we put it in the ground. And so there's not going to be water for us to buy, to put in the ground, to equate with our pumping out of the basin. And then there's not going to be water for us to do water banking. We've been banking upwards of 250 acre feet every year for the last several years for this very amount. So as Bill, for this very event. So as Bill said, the basin's in good shape, but it appears that we are going to be drawing on our water bank already, going into our rainy day funds potentially, because what we'll be pulling out won't be replenished as we typically do. So we're not in a panic situation, but there won't be that replenishment coming in, and then we'll start drawing down from our water banking account. So in future years, we just need to look at that and be very cautious, and that's where the issue will come in the future, where we were a little bit upset, we being the different M&I users, that we were lower priority than ag. But that's based on the assumption that there will be water for all the M&I users this year. Maybe a different case next year. and they may have to rethink this and reprioritize putting our recharge and our water banking above ag. Maybe it's not the full allocations, but at some point we can't run deficits for many, many years without running into some issues. So not to panic anybody, this is a paper exercise this year, but as Bill indicated, we're going to need to take some, implement our water shortage conditions in the near future. And we're also revisiting the potential penalties for people who overuse the allocations that we're allowing under a water shortage contingency. So that was the gist. The board is not, they're going to act on these priorities on the 21st, I believe, and we may send up some follow-up communications, but it was a good discussion. All the managers were there, and I think did a good job in representing M&I users and making sure voices were heard and were at the table.
Does that conclude the general counsel report?
That's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Comments from the public?
None.
Comments from Director Grace?
No comment. Thank you both Don and Bill for the update on our water usage and going into this drought.
Thank you, Director Jensen.
No questions.
Director Quinn.
I have nothing.
Vice President Roberts.
Just a quick question, Don. Is there lobbyists in Sacramento speaking about water? Down here in the south, because there's a lot of water up north, especially in Sacramento Delta. Why aren't we pumping water down to recharge the basin now?
Well, so we have been. Again, that's part of our M&I contract, Steve, for this very event that over the years, since we renewed in 2017, as I said, we had about a goal of about 250, 275 acre feet a year. On average, we use about 550 acre feet down in Cummings Valley. So the goal is to have a 5-year water bank supply there. I think we're somewhere in the range of 800 to 1,000 over the past 3 or 4 years. So we have a good bank supply, but the problem is this year we're not going to be able to keep banking because there's just not water available, Steve. There's a lot of reasons. Basically, it was just it's a bad water year. Snowpack's not there, so allocations have been cut, across the board, and people have to, accept those allocations.
Well, Don, I remember, we had this discussion, I think board and you and general manager at the time about, all of the fresh water in the Sacramento Delta going down to the ocean, and why can't we divert some of it to the arid places here in Southern California? I mean, this discussion goes on, for decades, and we still don't get any more water, yet it's free flowing into the ocean. I mean, that's a frustration for me just to know what happens. And the only answer I ever got was because the salmon run up the river and, yada, yada, yada. But at some point in time, I mean, the population has to be able to utilize some of that lost water that goes into the ocean. Anyway, that's just a rhetorical thing that it makes me crazy because there is water in California. It just has to come down the aqueduct, and we could recharge our basin and not have all these problems.
Yeah, it's a very complex and complicated issue, Steve. If you gave me about 3 days, we could.
I understand it is. Yeah, we've had that conversation before.
And as you may know, a good part of my life is also representing the Friant Water Authority that's in the mix of these things. And believe me, Friant, along with all the other, water agencies, metropolitan, we fight this battle on a daily basis. We've actually made major progress in changing how some of the operations run in the plumbing system in California is incredibly complex, beginning, from the north, all the different projects, and then you throw on top of it the environmental regulations, on top of things too, Steve. So that's where they all kind of go into this meat grinder and come out, and there's, been efforts to reform it. There've been some good progress made on things, but then every time you take a step to do some things like revisit how much water are needed for the Delta smelt, things like that. And then we're in litigation in the courts with the environmental groups, trying to change those rules. And so there are negotiations, I can tell you, going on right now, kind of to, again, have some voluntary agreement to get out of this, because the court system is not the way to obviously regulate these things, the back and forth. So it's complex, but the real issue this year, unfortunately, is the lack of water available for people. And yes, some of that is to meet Delta biological requirements, and that's just part of the existing legal infrastructure. I wish I could be more optimistic. I see good things, but then I see steps backwards as well. Good news is we're Friant's about to embark on a project. We've lost significant capacity getting water down to Arvin because of land subsidence, because of overpumping, but we're about to embark on a major project to restore that capacity. So hopefully some more water will at least be getting down to Arvin into that area. And I know the State Water Project is also, suffering from subsidence impacts to its canal. There's some bills in the legislature to provide funding to restore that too. That would certainly be helpful and increase, potential capacity too, particularly in wet years, so we can build up, the water banking that we're going to have to draw on now.
Yeah, Don, I brought this up because we've had this conversation years back, but I brought it up for the benefit of the two board members that we have been talking about this for a long, long time. And it's very frustrating, and thank you for that dialogue, because it helps the two new board members understand that these are ongoing issues that we've all been talking about, have been dealing with, but unfortunately there just isn't a resolution right now. Thank you.
Sure. Right. I'm going to go back to the public because Judith Cagle has her hand up. She's also a new member of both the Administrative Committee and the Finance Committee. So Christy, would you open the meeting up to Judith Cagle?
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. I had a question, and forgive my naivete about this, but a few minutes back, we were talking about refreshing the lakes, and then we're talking about the drought situation. And from a holistic point, I was wondering if council could speak to the issue of, you mentioned fees and fines. So potentially this year is a paper project to figure out how we get around this. And I understand we're banking some water, but what would be future ramifications of if we try to fill up these amenities that we have? Because of course the community, if they're being told that we're in a drought situation and that we don't have the lakes full, there will be an uproar, and we know that they have a legitimate concern. So I'm just curious as to how that all intersects, if possible.
Oh.
Mr.
May
President,
I ask some of that? I could answer some of that, or is that a legal question for our attorney?
Well, to be fair, Ms. Cagle, I'm not quite clear on the questions because, I heard Lakeville, I heard penalties, I heard several things. So I apologize, but if you could maybe restate.
Absolutely. Let me be clear. I guess my question was, given this scenario that we want to refill the lakes, and you said that utilization of additional waters under these new criteria may have built-in fines and fees. Do you have any idea what that could potentially be for refilling our amenities?
Mr. President. Perhaps I can
Sure.
help. Ms. Cagle, one of the major distinctions is we have numerous wells that the district owns and has operated for the last 50 years. The water that goes into the amenities is not potable water. We can't put that into the system to go to our residences and the country club. We have other wells that meet the state regulations for potable water. That water does not go into the lakes, although it's conceivable that it could in a pinch or something. So the basic distinction I want to get across is there are wells that just go into the lake. It's not the same in terms of penalties because it's our water. I think the penalties come into play for our users of our potable system, where we're putting into place restrictions to try to limit consumption, to stay within our available amount. And when people are violating those regulations that we put in place, then yes, there'd be a penalty to them. I hope that helps.
It does very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent question, Ms. Cagle. I think that concludes our general counsel report, and we can move to the general manager report.
Mr. President, members of the board, just to piggyback on that, thankfully, we were successful with the water rate adjustment so that we do have the wherewithal to take on some of these capital projects. And the timing, like I had said, with that agenda item is pretty good, because when we can get those rehab, they've been non-producing and they can now be putting out more than they had historically even. That's good, and the timing is good. We want to try to reduce our dependence on Cummings Valley water, but also do it in a sustainable way where we're not overdrafting our own aquifers. That's really critical. So it's good timing, and thanks to the community for supporting that rate increase, because this is what we do with it. The second item on my agenda was the tree grant status. So our logger, Arrowhead Enterprises, has commenced. They've been on what's known as the Anderson parcel. It's about a 50-acre parcel. I think they've completed it. So that's 50 acres, roughly $100,000 worth of grant money. That was the largest, most significant single piece. So part of the challenge we're now trying to deal with, frankly, is the route to take logs out. And Vic Leader is the principal at Arrowhead, and part of his concern is condition of and going out on deer trail. And so he's looking for us to allow him to go out the front door. Part of the incentive perhaps is he believes he has a market for some logs to go out the front door, which should offset our costs. So as we worked on this, you may recall the trucking was maybe $1,000 a load. This may mitigate that if we allow him to go out the front door to take it to a marketplace, as opposed to chipping it up or something along those lines. And I share that with you and the public because we may find ourselves having to allow that. And so the board and the public know we've been from day one pretty adamant about going out the back door of Deer Trail. But both the logger and now I think our foresters weighing in about it as well, as to the wisdom of using that back road. So good news is we're making progress. We're underway. That is about 1/10 of the overall project, just with that one property. The next item was we have between Chief Malance and myself and General Manager Shryock talked with the association. We're moving forward to get an RFID amenity card system. purchased, and that should probably take us a couple of months from a hardware and software perspective. The larger project, I think, is all of us residents getting new amenity cards with new photos through the association office. And, we're very thankful for them for their collaboration on this project. But then that amenity card, which is new, will automatically, via an RFID scan, open the visitor gate for a resident. So you don't have to buy it. It's a part of the amenity card. So I think that's really exciting, and just another evolution of our front gate security system. Mohammed has moved forward. Hopefully we will get some additional CARES Act funding, some $57,000, we hope. And as you may recall, I think we received $97,000 earlier. So it's money that really helps us, and it is much appreciated. The fencing project you approved last month has commenced, and those poles are just so perfectly straight along the back horse trail area. Plenty of room back there for the folks who had asked us about that a couple of months back. So that is underway. I wanted to hit on the street signs. I think I brought this up last month, and Chief Melanson had reminded me there's a traffic manual that calls for 3 colors: green, blue, and brown. And so we are still, Daniel's going to get us some samples to take a look at with the reflectivity we're talking about. So brown and white is probably as close as we can come to the brown and yellow, but still have it meet that that manual requirement with reflectivity. So I throw that out there, FYI. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Malinan. I don't see any hands up in the public, so I'll go to the board. Director Grace.
Yes, sir, Bill. I'd just like to say I've received several glowing reports about the new fencing, both in terms of its appearance and its functionality. So kudos to you and your team for that. I also wanted to ask about, do we anticipate any additional trenches or reinitiation of CARES Act or similar grant programs in light of the current stimulus or the recent stimulus? I don't know if the two are related or not, but
I think Director Gracie, yes, they are. However, I haven't seen anything yet from CSDA. And in the last go around, special districts weren't really identified for funding. So we got our funding through the county. To their credit, they were assisting the special districts, because municipalities and counties and larger counties got even a larger per capita amount. Cities got a smaller, and I can't remember how many, it was $13 or it was some amount. And then special districts, nothing. And so our county assisted us by taking part of their allocation and freeing up $2 million for special districts to apply for. And that's what we're working on. So I can't answer the question. I don't have enough background yet on what had been passed and whether it does or does not. My suspicion is it doesn't again, but I'd like to be wrong then.
But ultimately, it'll be up to the county and our relationship with them to try to carve more of that out if there is additional funding coming.
I think so, yes. And again, to their credit, that they have given some consideration to special districts, because there's a number of them in Kern County, many actually.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Jensen.
I have no questions.
Director Quinn.
I have nothing good to report, Bill.
Vice President Roberts.
Good report, Bill, but I have nothing, no other questions.
I echo those sentiments. That was a good report. Thank you so much. Future agenda items, A, solid waste rates. There are 2 items under there. One is a solid solid waste rate study, a preliminary final report, May 13th. And 2, a public hearing and adoption of the new rates, July 8th. Those are pending. Christy, was there anything else added to future agenda?
I did not have anything that came up during this meeting.
Last item is lucky item 13, and that calls for adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Great, thank you, Vice President Roberts. Thank you to the 12 members of the public who attended as attendees. Thanks to everyone here. I'll see you next month.
Okay. Signing off.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Adios.
Adios.